Ever been utterly stumped by the big question? You know, the one about what happens after we shuffle off this mortal coil.
Right.
If our source material for today is anything to go by, the answer isn't some like simple one-size-fits-all thing.
Yeah, definitely not. Forget the usual pictures of the afterlife. It
Yeah.
really looks like our experiences beyond this life are deeply personally tied to the lives we've actually lived here.
That's what makes today's exploration so fascinating, isn't it?
It really is. We're getting into excerpts from In Life Goes On, a work psychographed by Francisco Cândido Xavier, and it's attributed to the spirit André Luiz.
Now, André Luiz, some listeners might know his earlier book, No Solar.
Exactly. And if you've read No Solar, you probably have this specific image maybe of a very organized spiritual city.
Uh-huh, structured.
But this book, it takes us down some, well, different avenues. It shows a much wider, more diverse range of what happens after death.
Yeah, No Solar gave us that relatively ordered spiritual colony vibe, but here we're seeing experiences that are just wildly different.
That's the core of it.
So our goal today is to really unpack that diversity by focusing on the journeys of two specific people, Evelina Serpa and Ernesto Fantini.
But we should mention their real names were changed. That's to protect the privacy of, living people connected to these stories.
Good point. So by following Evelina and Ernesto as they kind of navigate this new spiritual place,
Uh-huh.
we want to understand, based on the source, how life actually continues after the physical body stops.
And what becomes really clear is that your own spiritual condition, your inner world, your thoughts, your emotions, that plays a huge role in shaping your reality in that next phase. It's very, very individual.
Okay, so let's start with Evelina. What was going on with her before her transition? Her life sounds, well, incredibly tough.
Yeah, it does. She had serious marital problems with her husband, Kaio.
And physical stuff, too.
Oh, yeah. It seemed to come out physically.
Well,
Heart palpitations, really bad headaches, nausea all the time. It paints this picture of someone whose emotional pain was really hitting her physically.
wow. And she had a strong religious background.
Very
Yeah.
Catholic. And that added this whole other layer of anxiety about what might happen next. She had these really human, heartfelt questions about the afterlife.
About her father and her son.
Exactly. Her father had passed and her son died at birth. Where were they? Would she find them? If she passed away too. These are questions so many people grapple with, I think.
Absolutely. And then she meets Fantini, Ernesto Fantini, at this retreat place.
Right, described as a serene retreat. And they kind of connect over having this shared rare disease.
So they have that in common.
Yeah, and they agree to just use first names Evelina and Ernesto. It's like finding someone else going through the same physical ordeal.
But their outlook was different. Fantini was more into spiritualism.
That's the interesting contrast. He'd apparently been reading spiritualist stuff. He even uses this analogy, the human being as a ternary.
Oh yeah, the carriage, horse, and driver.
That's the one, representing the different parts of our being. So it suggests he was already more open to this idea of, life continuing beyond the physical.
But Evelina wasn't there yet.
Not at all.
Yeah.
She was skeptical. Her Catholicism was her foundation, and these spiritualist ideas just didn't really fit.
She said something like, you stick with your researchers, I'll stick with my saints.
Pretty much. The Señor will be with his researchers. I will stay with my saints. It really shows that difference in how they saw the world at that point.
And yet, they both had these physical crises.
With really similar symptoms, that feeling of suffocation, the heart racing, head pain, stomach pain.
Even temperature changes.
Yeah.
And fear.
Yeah, temperature fluctuations and that deep primal fear of death. It's like this shared physical crisis created this odd bond between them, maybe hinting at something deeper connecting them already.
Like their bodies were reflecting the same kind of inner turmoil.
Could be. And then Evelina has this moment of clarity almost.
About her life.
Yeah, she realizes she'd spent her life being a satellite, just revolving around her husband, her mother, her stepfather. And she feels this deep desire to reclaim her own strength, to be herself, not just defined by these roles. It points to this need for personal growth that maybe hadn't quite happened yet.
That feeling of not quite owning her life, that seems important later.
Very. Now, let's shift to when Evelina faints during one of these crises and wakes up somewhere else entirely. In this health institution she doesn't recognize.
That's a massive turning point.
Huge. Because her first thought, her overwhelming feeling is, I've died.
And she can't reach her husband, Kaio.
Right. Which, if you think you just died not being able to contact your loved ones, that would be incredibly frightening. It just throws her into this state of total uncertainty.
Raises so many questions. for her and for us reading it.
And then, plot twist, she runs into Fantini there, in the same institution.
No way. What happened to him?
He also had a weird experience. He called it a fuga de si mesmo, like an escape from himself after having surgery.
An escape from himself.
Yeah, and it came with these flashes of past life memories, similar to what Evelina briefly felt when she fainted.
So they both had these strange, almost out-of-body type experiences.
It seems like it. And just like Evelina, Fantini can't get in touch with his wife and daughter.
Okay, so they're both stuck.
And he realizes, wait, this isn't the hospital I went into for my surgery. So now you have both of them in this unknown place, cut off from family, just trying desperately to figure out what is going on.
The confusion must have been immense. The rules of the place not being able to call home.
Absolutely. That shared confusion is central. Where are they? What is this place?
Fantini tries to rationalize it, though, doesn't he? He thinks maybe it's a psychiatric hospital.
He does. It's a logical leap, in a way. He figures maybe their physical problems cause some kind of mental break. And he notices these funny devices they use.
Devices?
Yeah, for applying rays to their heads before baths. So he's trying to fit it into an earthly framework. Mental institution tech, maybe?
That's such a human thing to do, try and find a familiar box for something totally bizarre.
Right. But Evelina's unease is different. She remembers another resident, Tamburini.
What about him?
Tamburini's convinced they're not on Earth anymore. And he goes to these magnetic studies.
Magnetic studies? What's that supposed to mean here?
Well, in this context, it probably means some kind of spiritual healing or energy work within that spiritual institution. But Evelina, remember, is still holding tight to her Catholic faith.
So she's hesitant about that idea.
Very hesitant. She doesn't want to engage with it. It really shows the conflict between her ingrained beliefs and this strange new reality she's in.
So everyone's just trying to process this through their own lens.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they both start noticing something physical or maybe non-physical, this feeling of getting lighter every day.
Lighter. Interesting.
Yeah, and Evelina describes her emotions feeling like they're rising up from her heart towards her brain. It's almost like their connection to the physical is loosening somehow.
That's a strange sensation to describe. And they ask about who's paying for all this.
They do. They ask the nurses, who pays? And the answer they get is just those who love you.
Cryptic.
Very. And they interpret it differently, of course. Evelina thinks of her husband, her parents' earthly love. Fantini is still skeptical, maybe thinking it's part of the mental institution setup.
Their perspectives really shape how they see everything.
Totally. And then they end up attending this spiritual culture meeting. It's led by someone called Irmão Claudio, Brother Claudio.
Okay, this sounds like maybe they'll get some answers.
It's definitely a turning point. The meeting's topic is of existence on Earth. And Claudio emphasizes thinking about our earthly lives as like specific work the spirit undertakes.
Work for the spirit.
Yeah. And he stresses needing faith alongside science, not just one or the other. A more complete view of existence.
Does he mention reincarnation?
He does. The idea that we come back physically multiple times for spiritual growth, that physical life isn't random, it's a mission we're here to fulfill.
Ah, so that would speak directly to Evelina's earlier worries about her father and son.
Precisely. And Claudio explains that what you feel and experience after death varies a lot. It depends on what your earthly duties were and the spiritual qualities you developed while you were here.
So not a standard heaven or hell for everyone.
Not according to this, no. It's tailored to the individual.
Which kind of answers Evelina's fear about finding loved ones. Maybe it's less about location and more about spiritual connection.
That seems to be the implication. It's about resonance, not geography. Now, they talk more with Irmão Claudio later, and he gets into some really mind-bending stuff.
Like what?
Well, he clarifies that this world they're in now, it's just as material as Earth.
Wait, material, not like ghosts floating around.
Nope. But the matter there is different. It's more malleable, more easily shaped by thought. He literally says matter boils down to energy.
Whoa. Okay, that's a big shift from how we usually think about reality.
Huge shift. So a key takeaway here from André Luiz's perspective is that the afterlife isn't just some floaty, ethereal place. It's a tangible reality, but one where thought has direct creative power. That's pretty radical compared to traditional ideas.
And the scale he talks about. It's immense, right?
Staggering. He mentioned something like 150,000 people dying every day.
Wow.
So you can imagine the sheer diversity of conditions people arrive in. It just highlights how vast and complex this spiritual dimension must be.
He definitely drives home the point. No single uniform death experience.
And he makes this critical point. People arrive in the afterlife as they are. Dying doesn't instantly change your personality or intelligence.
So if you were a jerk, you're still kind of a jerk initially.
Basically, yeah. If you were foolish, you're still foolish at first. If you were wise, that wisdom comes with you. Your inner state shapes your initial experience over there.
What about those accounts of, like, darker or unhappy places?
He addresses that. He explains them as places where individuals with similar spiritual imbalances kind of gather. Much like mental health institutions on Earth group people with similar conditions.
So it's not the place itself that's inherently bad.
Exactly. It's a reflection of the inner turmoil of the people there. He uses this lovely analogy: gardens and orchards are still beautiful even if sick people are enjoying them. The environment isn't negative, it's the internal state creating the suffering.
That makes sense. Evelina was confused about seeing solid buildings, though, right?
Yeah, she asks about that. Claudio explains they arise from thought acting on that malleable matter. He compares it to how we develop plastics on Earth. Our ideas shape the material world.
So in that realm, thoughts literally build things.
That seems to be the core concept. And he also mentions there are people from all earthly religions nearby, sometimes still clinging really tightly to their old dogmas.
Still stuck in their ways, even after death.
Apparently. He even gently suggests to Evelina that her own religious anxieties, if they persist, might lead her towards a kind of spiritual, psychiatric institution for help with those rigid beliefs.
A subtle nudge to be more open-minded, maybe?
Perhaps. It highlights how inflexible beliefs can create their own hurdles in the afterlife.
So they're starting to get, this isn't the heaven or hell from Sunday school. It's more a reflection of where you are, spiritually speaking.
Precisely. And they get more involved now. They actually ask to visit these psychiatric-type institutions.
Really? That's brave.
It is. And it leads them to the Institute of Spiritual Protection, guided by an instructor, Rebus.
What's that place like?
Interestingly, it feels familiar and comforting to them, a big contrast to their initial confusion.
That's good.
Rebus explains its focus as protection and treatment, all based on fraternal understanding. They also meticulously record information. For analysis later by their friends in the rear guard, he says. Sounds like a structured system for support and tracking progress.
And Rebus talks about memory loss after death.
Yes, the veiling of past memories. He says it's usually temporary, and how long it lasts depends on the individual's spiritual level.
He compared earthly life to hypnosis.
He did. Extended hypnosis. The idea seems to be that right after death, your focus is mostly on your immediate past life and your current spiritual state.
So they're being looked at based on their recent actions.
That's what Rebus clarifies. It's not some grand judgment day for everything ever, but more about the impact and consequences of your most recent life.
That must hit Fantini hard, given what he's been thinking about.
You'd think so. And Rebus also stresses again, suffering after death isn't about the place, it's about the spirit's inner state. People in disharmony get grouped together for treatment, like in a hospital.
Group therapy, afterlife style.
Kind of. And this leads to a crucial directive for Fantini. Rebus tells him he needs to get ready to face the people he left behind on Earth.
I face them. Why?
To really understand them, and maybe more importantly, to understand himself. It implies our earthly loose ends still matter over there.
Which brings us to Fantini's confession.
Yeah, really powerful moment. He finally admits he killed a friend years ago out of jealousy over his wife.
Wow. That's a heavy burden.
Huge. And it seems this new environment is pushing him to finally confront it.
So after that, they visit a temple.
Yes, the Temple of the New Revelation. It's described as simple, and the focus there is totally on self-reflection, not judging others.
What's the main message?
That earthly stuff, titles, money, old fights, it just doesn't matter anymore. What matters is who you've become.
And charity. Love for others.
Absolutely central.
Yeah.
That's presented as the key to spiritual progress. Not rituals or status, but the state of your heart and how you treat people.
That seems to motivate them because they join a rescue mission next, right?
You do. They join Herman Claudio's rescue caravan to help disturb spirits, which takes them into this word called the umbral.
The umbral. What exactly is that, according to Claudio?
He describes it as a kind of lower transitional spiritual zone. It's basically created and sustained by the negative thoughts and disturbed emotions of the people there.
So like a manifestation of collective negativity.
Pretty much. He calls it a place of disordered thoughts, hyper-individualism, no discipline, just chaos born from negativity.
But God allows this.
Claudio reiterates the principle of free will. We choose our actions, but there are always consequences. Justice, divine justice, plays out even there.
And the rescue isn't easy.
No, they encounter resistance. Some spirits just aren't ready or willing to change or accept help. It shows that choice remains.
And then Tullio Mancini shows up, unexpectedly.
Completely out of the blue. A young man, Tullio, who recognizes Evelina.
Recognizes her.
Yeah, and he says something like, now I'm alive because I've seen you. His memory of his own death is all jumbled up. He thinks he meant to harm himself, but Caio somehow intervened.
Caio again. Okay, things are getting connected here. How does Evelina react?
It's complex. She remembers being deeply in love with him once, but now she feels fear, even repugnance.
Wow, that's a shift.
It suggests she's changed significantly, spiritually and emotionally. That old connection doesn't hold the same power.
So Instructor Rebus helps her make sense of this.
He does. It's a key teaching moment. Rebus explains that her intense feelings for Tullio back then actually contributed to his emotional instability in life.
Her feelings affected him that much.
Apparently so. It's a stark example in this source of how our actions, our emotions, have real consequences, sometimes across lifetimes. It really highlights this idea of interconnectedness and emotional responsibility.
And Rebus talks about different kinds of love.
Yes, moving from narcissistic love, self-centered attachment towards selfless love, unconditional, compassionate caring.
And then there's that huge revelation about Evelina's motherhood experience.
Right. Rebus explains that her intense guilt and remorse over Tullio's apparent suicide acted like a magnet.
A magnet.
It attracted the spirit of another suicidal individual to her womb in a later life. This resulted in a very difficult motherhood for her, essentially as a form of karmic balancing or reparation.
Wow. So karmic reparation means her past feelings led to a future difficult experience to sort of balance the scales.
That's the idea presented here. Cause and effect across lives, driven by deep emotional states.
So what should Evelina do about Tullio now?
Rebus advises her to help him, guide him in the spiritual realm, but not as a lover, more like a mother figure, a mentor.
A totally different dynamic.
Completely. Focused on nurturing and support, not romance. Rebus stresses that selfless dedication is key to helping someone spiritually.
And that affinity isn't just romance.
Exactly. True connection, true love, involves continued effort and support, even if feelings aren't returned in the way you might expect.
Okay. And after all this, they get the chance to go back to Earth.
Yes, the prospect of visiting their old homes comes up.
That must be intense. How long has it been?
2 years since their transitions, according to the text. Rebus gives them instructions, represent the principles of their spiritual city, use mental connection if needed.
So they go back near São Paulo.
Yeah, and they're filled with anticipation, but also probably a lot of nervousness about what they'll find.
And Evelina sees.
She sees her husband, Caio, in their old house, with another woman, Vera.
Ouch. That's gotta hurt. A real shock.
A massive reality check. And then the really weird part sinks in.
They can't see her?
Nope. Can't see her, can't hear her. But she can see and hear them perfectly.
Being a ghost, basically. Present but invisible. That's incredibly isolating.
Must be. And Fantini sees difficult things too. He sees his daughter, senses her resentment towards him and his ex-wife.
Painful reminders.
Definitely. He even thinks about how they were just teaching Tullio about detachment. And now look at them, struggling to detach from these earthly scenes. The irony isn't lost on him.
It's like getting a raw, unfiltered view of the emotional mess they left behind.
Exactly. And the confrontations or observations continue. Fantini sees his ex-wife, Elisa. She seems unwell, mentally fragile.
And making accusations.
Yeah, about someone named Desiderio.
Ah, Evelina's father.
Right, and then the spirited Desiderio himself shows up, interacting with Elisa. He's clearly tormented, full of jealousy and anger towards Fantini and another man, Amancio.
Amancio. Evelina's stepfather. This is getting complicated.
It's a real web. Meanwhile, Evelina's watching her mother, Brigida, and Amancio. She hears her mother worrying about Desiderio, saying he transitioned full of anger.
Which confirms what Fantini saw.
It does. And then Brigida and Amancio start talking about adopting a child.
Okay.
Evelina sees an opportunity. She mentally suggests to her mother, what if you adopted my father, Desiderio, in his next life? Give him a chance to return and heal.
Wow. That's a bold plan. Does Amancio go for it?
Surprisingly, yes. He agrees, though he has some conditions. But his willingness, given his own past issues, which we learn more about, shows maybe some capacity for good in him.
Interesting. So they go back to the spiritual side and talk to Rebus.
Yep, debrief time. Rebus updates them on Tullio, his rebirth is being planned, and Evelina still needs to guide him spiritually.
And Caio. What about the money from Fantini's land?
Reeves explains the karmic side of it. Kaio sold the land, got rich, but those actions have consequences that will eventually play out to benefit Elisa and Vera.
How? Through future lives again.
Exactly. The source outlines future rebirths. Elisa will come back as Kaio and Vera's daughter. Coolio will be their firstborn son.
So they'll all be together again, working things out.
That's the idea. Souls returning to resolve past issues and karmic debts within the family unit over lifetimes.
And what about Desiderio, Evelina's father?
Rebus confirms her request is granted. He will be reborn as Brigida and Amancio's adopted son.
Even though Amancio has his own issues? Rebus mentions he's an atheist and even a murderer.
Yes, Rebus highlights Amancio's complexity. He's done terrible things, but he's also deeply human, capable of charity. The idea is Desiderio, in his new life, will eventually see the good in Amancio too. It's part of the reconciliation process.
It's all incredibly intricate. We also see Kaio being harsh with Elisa in the spirit world.
Yeah, he encounters her in that institution and is very dismissive. Shows he's still got a long way to go.
But Fantini shows growth.
Big time. He actually pleads for Desiderio's forgiveness, acknowledging the man's love for Elisa and her daughter. That's a huge step for him.
Then Elisa passes away.
And Desiderio's grief is immense. They have this deep spiritual connection. Evelina has to intervene spiritually, gently urging him to let Elisa go, to move forward.
So much drama even after death. And Kaio decides to marry Vera.
He does, kind of unexpectedly. The narrative suggests Evelina's unseen influence played a part.
Paving the way for that future family unit.
Right. Tullio reborn as their son, breaking the cycle of hate, and Elisa eventually joining them as a daughter. It's all pointing towards eventual healing and reconciliation, even if it takes lifetimes.
So, wrapping up the story, Evelina feels gratitude towards Vera and still loves Kaio, but differently.
Yes, her love for Kaio transforms. And Claudio gives some final thoughts about how our obligations continue after death. This endless cycle of learning, renewing ourselves, progressing towards perfection through rebirth, both here and there.
It's a continuous journey.
Always. We get more details on Tullio's rebirth and Desiderio's return as the adopted son, needing to face Amancio with forgiveness eventually.
And Desiderio meets Elisa again before they're reborn.
Yes, a final, transformative meeting in the spirit world. A chance for closure before they return.
There's also a side story about Mariana and Joaquim.
Right, a couple who faced hardship, get a new spiritual home, and they will be the ones to actually adopt Desiderio in his new life on Earth.
So many connections.
This really shows how interconnected everything is. And the story ends with Evelina and Fantini returning joyfully to their spiritual home, celebrating their progress, ready for whatever comes next.
A sense of accomplishment, but also the journey continues.
Exactly. It's never really over.
So as we finish this deep dive into And Life Goes On, what are the big takeaways for you? For me, it's just how incredibly complex and personal the afterlife seems to be in this source. It's not one thing.
No, definitely not. It's not static, not a final stop. It's this ongoing, dynamic process, learning, growing, fixing things, reconciling, and it's all deeply tied to the choices we make right here, right now.
That interconnectedness through rebirth is huge too, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's a central thread. Our relationships, our actions, they ripple outwards, sometimes across lifetimes. And the source really hammers home that life continues with purpose. There are always chances for spiritual growth, whether we're in a physical body or not.
It makes you think differently about, well, everything. Life, death, relationships.
For sure. It really highlights how much our present actions matter, how they shape not just now, but what comes next, here and beyond.
Maybe the biggest thing it leaves you pondering is, if this idea of interconnectedness and continuous growth is true, how does that change how we handle things like love? Or forgiveness, or just taking responsibility in our own lives today?
That's the question, isn't it? Definitely something powerful to reflect on.